Hi, I'm Caitlin Van Mall, host of I Survived. If you enjoy I Survived, we are excited to announce a new launch. Starting November 15th, we'll be reposting our classic episodes from Season 1 of I Survived. We hope to reach a whole new audience with these important stories of survival. And for those of you who have been with us since the beginning, we think these powerful episodes warrant another listen. Starting November 15th, look out for those episodes and more news from I Survived.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 241 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing excelente.
Ooh, excelente.
Yeah.
That's always better than excellent.
Throw a little flavor in there.
Yeah.
No, I'm doing really well. I'm having a good week. We've got a good slate of episodes for everyone this weekend.
We do.
On TCAT, we're talking about William Sullivan and Nicole Kosinskis. This is basically a teenage romance that turned into the murder of a parent.
It's a good episode.
It is a good episode. You know, I said teenage romance, but it was really, these two young people were obsessed with each other.
They certainly were.
And were willing to do anything to not be kept apart.
Yeah.
We're seeing some great support, Gibbs. Let's give our Patreon shout outs to Stephen Woolston.
What's going on, Woolston?
Carly Sweezy.
Hey, Sweezy.
Christy Wynn.
What's going on, Christy?
Lisa Colts.
Well, hi, Lisa.
Isabel Saavedra. Brenna Grindle.
Hey, what's going on, Grindle?
Andrew.
Good old Andrew.
Jessica Renfro.
Hey, Renfro.
Amanda Van.
Hey, Amanda.
Matthew Legault.
Well, Legault.
Toby.
Oh, good old Toby.
Kyle Seaman.
Hey, Kyle.
Susan Avia.
Hey, always Avia.
Carly Hyman.
Hey, Carly.
David Byers.
What's going on, David?
And last but not least, Leroy Campbell.
Well, thank you, Leroy.
Yeah, so we appreciate all that new support. And then if we go back into the vault, Gibbs, this week we selected Anna Palin.
Well, appreciate that, Anna.
Yeah, appreciate the new support, the continued support. We had some great PayPal donations from Daniel Javier.
Hey, thank you, Javier.
Judy Larson.
Hey, Judy.
And Leah Miller.
Well, appreciate that, Leah.
Yeah, thanks to you as well. All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm always ready.
We are talking about the Crawford family murders. In 1970, the bodies of Therese Crawford and her children, Katherine, James, and Karen, were discovered hidden in the family car at the bottom of a gorge off the remote southwestern coast of the Australian state of Victoria. The four victims lived in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. Therese and her children had been electrocuted and bashed to death in their beds the previous night. The killer loaded the bodies into the family's vehicle, drove 3 hours, and somehow arranged for the car to run over the edge of the gorge. Police launched a nationwide search for the family's father, Elmer Crawford, to determine first if he was safe, but I think more importantly, Gibbs, they wanted to see what he could tell them about the gruesome fate of his family. This search soon turned into a manhunt. When it became apparent Elmer was the prime suspect. But I think what made the case so terrifying yet intriguing was that Elmer was nowhere to be found in the hours, days, weeks, and months following the murders. The coroner's inquest held the year after the murders concluded that it was a horrifying case of what we now categorize today as family annihilation. These are cases where a person, statistically, usually a man, kills his partner and children, sometimes themselves, out of a desire for power, control, and often revenge. According to news.com.au, the inquest heard about the nature and extent of injuries sustained by the 4 victims. All the children had been beaten in the head with a blunt instrument repeatedly, whereas Therese had been subdued by only 1 blow to the head. All but the youngest, Karen, had been electrocuted. In the years since the murders, there have been several developments in the search for Elmer Crawford, but to this day, police don't seem to be any closer to answers than they were at the start of the investigation.
Well, these murders sound brutal.
They're very brutal. And if this was indeed a family annihilation, it's horrible to think about. That's just something that I'll never be able to wrap my head around.
How could a father do that to his kids and his wife?
Yeah, to me, it's just unthinkable. I mean, it's something that I can't even imagine thinking about, contemplating, let alone actually, going through the act of hurting those who I love, those that are closest to me. I just don't get it.
It's hard to fathom.
35-year-old Therese Crawford was a stay-at-home mother. She and her husband of 13 years, 40-year-old Elmer, lived in a brick bungalow in the working-class suburb of Glenroy with their 3 children, 13-year-old Katherine, 8-year-old James, and 6-year-old Karen. Therese was pregnant with the couple's 4th child in late June 1970. Elmer had taken a week off work from his job at the Victorian Racing Club and was keeping busy working around the house. But when the day came for him to return to work, he didn't show up. According to several news articles, it was reported that on July 1st, 1970, Elmer spent all day meticulously cleaning out the family car, a 1956 white FE Holden sedan. Gibbs, he even apparently went so far as to remove the back seat.
That's definitely doing some deep cleaning.
It is. And, no doubt, right? Knowing what is going to come out, people look at this as extremely suspicious.
Sure.
He also apparently did some home maintenance, like replacing the fuses and things like that. And I tell you, man, every time we do a case in Australia, I swear it involves a Holden.
It does.
Almost every case we do.
Must be the most popular vehicle there.
It's the most popular in true crime stories, it seems to me.
Followed up by the Subaru.
That night, after everyone had gone to bed, a killer struck Therese in the head. According to the Age newspaper, the weapon was an iron bar inserted into a garden hose.
It's like a padded club?
I don't know, man. I've never heard of this. Would it make less noise? I'm trying to figure out the reason why someone would want to use the garden hose over top. The only thing I can figure out is noise.
That's what I'm thinking as well.
Once Therese was unconscious, the killer attached alligator clips to her ears and hands. He then electrocuted her by attaching the clips to a longer cord, which was connected to a homemade electric device. The shock of 240 volts of electricity killed Therese instantly, leaving major burns on her skin where the clips had been attached. And maybe this goes, back to the garden hose as well. It's possible, Gibbs, that the killer's intent was to render Therese unconscious and didn't want to take the chance that the iron bar would kill her, and therefore use the garden hose as maybe some type of padding
to soften the blow and do enough damage to render her unconscious, then allow the electrocution to kill her.
The killer then went into the girls' shared bedroom. According to the Herald Sun newspaper, he savagely beat Katherine about the head while she was asleep with a sharp implement, then electrocuted her with the device the same way that he had done with Therese. Karen was spared the electrocution, but the killer bashed her to death with a hammer, inflicting horrific head injuries. According to the book Almost Perfect by Greg Fogarty, it's believed James may have awoken and made his way to his parents' room due to the amount of noise. And that makes sense to me, Gibbs. A lot of times we're talking about multiple members of a family being killed.
Yeah.
And I always kind of go back to the Amityville murders. Now, those were gunshots, and that's different, but you would have to believe that what has transpired up to that point, there still would have been a good amount of noise.
Yeah, I'm such a light sleeper. I think I would have heard everything going on. But then again, I know you say you're a really deep sleep person.
Yes.
So maybe you would not have woken up during that.
Well, I think it varies by individual, but I could see where that speculation comes from. But James suffered the same fate as his sister and mother. He was bludgeoned to death with the same sharp implement, and then he was electrocuted with the electrical device. All three children sustained fractured skulls. Their wounds were so significant that bone and brain matter were visible. So, their head injuries were much different than what we talked about with their mother, Therese.
But how horrific for the kids to be beaten so badly at, 13, 8, and 6 years old?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. This is an extremely horrific, brutal crime. It was later determined that the killer wrapped the bodies of his victims in blankets before dragging them outside one by one into the garage. He loaded them into the rear of the family car and covered them with a tarp. He also placed a loaded .22 caliber rifle, family photos, 2 hammers, one of which he'd used to kill the children, a motorized scooter, cans of gasoline, a hose, and an electrical extension cord into the car. Attached to the extension cord were 5 small leads with alligator clips on the end, which led to the electrocution device. This is a lot going on.
That is.
I mean, this person has already murdered 4 people, right? A mother and 3 young children.
Yes.
He loads them into the car, but then loads a bunch of other things. I mean, a motorized scooter.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to find out why that is later on.
We will.
But I think my point here is there is some thought, right, going on in this person's mind. Now, none of it is good. These are bad things that this person's doing, but there's some thought being put into it. I almost want to use the word meticulous.
Yeah.
This is not a frenzied, haphazard way of doing things. The garden hose over the lead pipe, the electrocution device, all of that had to have been set up beforehand.
Definitely sounds planned.
Yeah, not spur of the moment, right? The killer drove the vehicle 120 miles away to Lockhart Gorge on the shore of Port Campbell National Park on the southwest coast of Victoria. It's a long drive. This was about 3 hours away.
It's not a short trip.
According to news.com.au, after the killer arrived, he attached the hose to the rear exhaust pipe of the car. He then pulled it over the roof and pushed the other end through the driver's side window. As detailed by author Greg Fogarty, who grew up on the same road that the Crawford family lived on, the killer spent about 2 hours in the pitch dark constructing a makeshift limestone pathway across a drainage ditch in front of the car.
I mean, that's pretty labor intensive.
Yeah, it took some effort.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a 3 hour drive, 2 hours worth of work to, build this pathway. But what the pathway did was it allowed the vehicle to gain momentum as it rolled forward off the cliff and then below into the water. In later reports, it was stated that the killer also took the motorized scooter out of the car to use as his escape vehicle. So I kind of foreshadowed that a little bit. But again, I just want to really point out the fact that there is quite a bit of planning here. There's also quite a bit of effort being expended.
Yeah. Why would you take the garden hose, attach it to the exhaust, and put it into the window of the car if the victims were already dead?
Well, there's really no reason to do that other than to make it look as though Therese took her own life and the life of her children and then drove off the cliff.
Yeah, which takes some pre-planning.
Police theorize that the killer left the engine on, the handbrake off, put the car into first gear, and then watched from the edge of the cliff as the vehicle went over the side of the gorge. He probably hoped it would land in the Southern Ocean and be swept away. But that's not what happened. Instead, the car landed on a rock shelf 200 feet below.
Yeah, the car just barely missed going into the ocean. It was so close. When you look at the pictures that you can find online, you can see the car just feet away from sliding into the ocean. I mean, so close that you could see the waves hitting the rocks below and the water shooting up in the air where the car was.
The killer is then thought to have fled the scene on the scooter. According to The Age, on the morning of July 2nd, Katherine's best friend stopped by the house just after 8 a.m. to get Katherine for their walk to school. Elmer, who wasn't at work, unexpectedly answered the door. Katherine's friend could only see his face and hand, with the door obscuring the rest of his body. Elmer told the girl that Katherine had the flu and wouldn't be going to school. Neighbors on Cardinal Road saw him walk to the front of the driveway later that day and look around before going back inside. In the early afternoon of July 2nd, tourists stopped at the gorge and noticed the vehicle on the rock shelf below. The car's front end was completely battered, like it had been involved in a head-on collision. Well, and that makes sense to me. I mean, it essentially was.
Yeah, it fell 200 feet before hitting the rock.
The driver's side door was swung open over the ocean. Various items lay scattered about on the ledge as if they had been flung from the vehicle due to the force of the landing. The tourists could also see the hose from the exhaust leading to the driver's window. So, I mean, Gibbs, you got to think about these people. They're going to, look over the edge, look at the ocean. All of a sudden, they see what had to have been an extremely bizarre sight.
Yeah.
When the local police arrived, they quickly found the vehicle was in a dangerous position. And we mentioned it, right? It's kind of on this ledge.
Right.
Pretty tough to send somebody down there to examine it, where it was located.
Well, and the weather wasn't ideal.
No, it was cold. It was wintry, blustery type weather. But the way that it was described was that the car was essentially balanced on this rock shelf. And I think officers were wary about risking any type of movement because they thought it might send it over the edge into the ocean. Now, at this point, I don't think anyone had any clue as to what they would find inside the vehicle. It could have been that someone stole the car, a group of kids, whoever it was, took it for a joyride, then ran it off the side of the gorge. Police traced the vehicle's registration to Elmer Crawford of Cardinal Road, Glenroy. And we mentioned it, Gibbs. The car appeared empty. I think officers assumed it was a case of a car being stolen and then abandoned.
But it hadn't been reported stolen.
At around 6 p.m., police knocked on the family home's front door. No one answered. And as far as police were concerned, they didn't see any sign of anyone inside. The police spoke to several neighbors around that same time who told officers that they had not seen Therese or the kids that day, which they thought was unusual. They did mention to police that they had just missed Elmer. The neighbors had seen him in the driveway, just about half an hour earlier. He had walked up to the front gate and looked around, but then no one really saw him after that. So police are at the home. They don't see any signs of a disturbance. There's no answer from anyone inside. So what are they going to do at this point, Gibbs, but return to the station? They don't know the gravity of the situation.
No, they do not.
I mean, to those officers, they're most likely thinking they're just going out on a routine kind of situation to talk to the owner of a car, which has probably been stolen and that is now destroyed. And they're going to have to inform.
Yeah. Hey, we found your car.
Yeah. Sorry to tell you, but somebody stole your car and ran it off the gorge.
Yeah.
But I think back at the gorge, police were starting to believe that something wasn't quite right. I mean, first of all, they hadn't been contacted by Elmer, which you would think probably by that time they would have been if his car would have been stolen.
He might be missing it by this point.
And then, we've got to talk about this pathway, right? Pretty easy to see that this pathway across the ditch had been constructed to facilitate the vehicle plunging off the cliff. At around 10 p.m., police returned to the Crawford home. It was still dark inside. And again, there was no response when officers knocked on the door. So I think by this time, pretty evident that it had transformed from this kind of routine, hey, we need to talk to you, to, hey, we're thinking something's wrong. There's real fear for this family's safety.
More of a welfare check now.
All right, Gibbs, let's take a quick break to talk about Daily Harvest. The holidays are approaching. There's going to be a lot of get-togethers. There's a lot of gift planning, and you have to do all of that while trying to juggle work. Everyone's schedule is always thrown out of whack during this time of year. But even when there's this much change in my routine, there's one thing that I never have to think about, and that's what I'm eating in my day. Daily Harvest has my back with delicious, easy-to-make food that I know is good for me. Daily Harvest delivers delicious harvest bowls, flatbreads, smoothies, and more, all built on organic fruits and vegetables right to your door, and it conveniently stays fresh in your freezer. Daily Harvest takes literally minutes to prepare, and they never use preservatives, added sugar, or anything artificial. That goes for everything. It's hard to choose a Daily Harvest favorite because they have so many delicious options, but if I had to choose one, it would be their broccoli and cheese harvest bowl. That one is amazing. Daily Harvest is all about preserving and protecting the earth for current and future generations to come. So you can feel good about the choices you are making physically and for the environment. So keep it simple during the holidays with Daily Harvest. Go to dailyharvest.com/truecrime to get up to $40 off your first box. That's dailyharvest.com/truecrime for up to $40 off your first box. dailyharvest.com/truecrime. And next up is Air Medcare Network. Listen, in every single episode that we do, we dive deep into a number of unforeseen scenarios. So anyone that has listened to this podcast knows the unexpected does happen. Well, if a medical emergency arises, an Air Medcare Network membership protects your family and your finances. Air Medcare Network crews provide air medical transport to the nearest and most appropriate trauma center. And as a member, you'll never see a bill for that flight. That's right. Members never pay a dime for transport when flown by an AMCN provider. Health insurance may not cover the full cost of emergency medical air transport. So this is an important membership to have. It covers everyone in your household for just pennies a day. And right now, True Crime All the Time Unsolved listeners get up to a $50 Amazon or Visa e-gift card when you join. So be prepared. With an Air Medcare Network membership, visit airmedcarenetwork.com/true and use our offer code TRUE. They managed to gain access through an open window. There were no sounds inside the home, but officers' worst fears were about to be confirmed. When they turned on the lights, Gibbs, it looked like something out of a horror movie. Inside the main room and the girls' bedroom, it was a very gruesome scene. Now, there was no sign of the family. There were no bodies, but the blood-soaked bedding made it pretty difficult for police to believe that the Crawford family was still alive. Trails of blood led from 2 bedrooms out into the hallway and kitchen, and then to the back door. A pair of men's blood-stained pajamas were found. What was unusual was that James's room seemed untouched, as did the kitchen and living area. A half-eaten bowl of cereal was in the kitchen sink, and a note for the milkman advising that all deliveries were to be stopped seemed odd. I mean, you got to put that up against all this blood and carnage.
Yeah. I wonder what the police were thinking about. Where are these people at? Where are the kids? What happened to everybody? Are they in the car?
Yeah, well, I would think at least someone on the police force would have had that thought. But then you've also have to, balance it out with, okay, we've got blood everywhere. We've got drag marks as though bodies have been dragged out the back door. I don't know if that would be the first thought.
Yeah. Just a lot of bizarre things happening.
Yeah. I think it would be real mysterious, wondering what in the heck happened here. It was evident to police that someone had tried to clean blood stains from the carpet. In the living room, a bottle of cleaning solution was still foaming, as if someone had literally just put it down and run out the door just moments before.
Well, maybe whoever just did that didn't expect the police to show up, obviously, and fled the scene thinking they had a lot more time to clean the carpet and the rest of the crime scene.
When police got to the garage, they found a motorized scooter and the back seat of a car. Okay, maybe a little strange, right?
Sure.
There's no car in there. Now, that could also be because there's no one at home.
Right.
You got a motorized scooter, not that out of the ordinary. The back seat of a car is a little strange.
Sure, it'll make you scratch your head a little bit.
But then the whole house is strange at this point, right? The whole scene is bizarre, mysterious, deadly. Something bad happened. And no doubt, by this point, the police knew that they had something much, much worse on their hands than just a stolen car.
Oh, for sure.
Now, they didn't know if the Crawford family was still alive or where they could be. The homicide squad was put on notice to drive out to the gorge from Melbourne first thing the next day to assess the scene, while officers continued to process the family home. The next day, on July 3rd, the local rescue squad went out to the crash site. They were lowered down onto the rock ledge to pull the vehicle back from the edge, stabilize it on the ledge, and assess the situation. By this point, the car windows were hard to see through because of the salt spray in the air. In the gap in the driver's side window where the hose had been inserted, they found rags had been stuffed there. When the rescue officers managed to open the doors and look inside, they could see blood spatter on the dashboard and the front seat. Blood was also smeared on the interior roof of the car, but they instantly noticed something else. It was an extremely odd smell, a strange, musky odor. The crash's impact had violently tossed the contents of the car all around the interior, which there's no way it couldn't have, right?
Oh, sure, the impact.
But even before that occurred, it was obvious that whoever had driven the car to the gorge had treated the vehicle like a trash can.
Yeah, it's just like someone took a lot of garbage and put it inside the car.
Inside the car, they found a lead pipe, hammers, a rifle, full gasoline cans. They also found a toolbox, family photos, documents, and snacks. And Gibbs, as rescue personnel were picking their way through all of this stuff in the car, they soon uncovered the bodies of Therese, Katherine, James, and Karen, laying in place of where the back seat should have been. But there was no sign of Elmer.
So I think at this point, the investigators have an idea of what occurred back at the house.
Yeah, I don't think it would have been that hard for them to start to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Got all this blood in the house. Now you find the bodies of 4 family members in the car. They had to put 2 and 2 together, Gibbs, and believe that these 4 individuals were murdered inside that house and then put in that car which was then driven over the gorge. And Elmer had to be the prime suspect.
Well, sure.
First of all, they can't find him. And we talk about it all the time. The husband, the wife, the significant other is always suspect number one. They're always looked at first.
So they eventually get the car back up on the road. They, take a few hours to hook it up and get it back up there. They've already taken the bodies out, but now they have the car to do some further investigation. I mean, the media was on site too, which was kind of interesting because when you see the photos online, they show the car being hooked up and slowly pulled up, still photos, but it's pretty interesting to see the car dangling from the wire of the winch as they get it to the top.
When, members of the media, they got to be frothing at the mouth. I mean, trying to figure out, okay, what's going on.
Sure.
I mean, the good thing is that they did remove the bodies before using the winch to pull the car up. But I think the priority for the police was locating Elmer. Investigators had to go through all possible scenarios, including trying to figure out if anyone outside the immediate family could have wanted to harm Therese or the children. But I think they figured out pretty quickly that just did not seem likely. As detailed in the book, Almost Perfect, as investigators continued their search of the Crawford home, they found what appeared to be Therese's engagement and wedding bands on the mantle in the living room. They also found a letter written by Therese to her older sister, which hadn't been mailed. And this letter was pretty interesting. The tone was not bright, bubbly. It was basically Therese confiding in her sister that she wasn't happy about this fourth pregnancy. At one point, she wrote, "I've been so upset, but what's the use? I am 2.5 months now. So it looks like I've had it this time. We were going to come up home this Christmas, but won't be able to now, as I'll be due at the end of January." According to The Age, on the table along with this personal letter was a newspaper article from 1969, giving opposing views on the abortion debate. Abortion was still very much taboo in Australia at the time and had only been legalized in Victoria in 1969. But it wasn't readily available, and the many restrictions around the procedure made it inaccessible to most women. Police discovered Therese had experienced a 3-month debilitating bout of postpartum depression following the birth of their youngest child, Karen. There were no signs that an intruder had broken into the home. None of the neighbors had noticed any suspicious activity on the evening of July 1st. The week before, neighbors had seen Elmer making numerous trips to the local dump with his trailer and car filled to the brim. He also had numerous fires in his backyard where he burned trash. Police didn't have any evidence that anyone else had been seen in the vicinity of the family home, so they decided to investigate the family's financials as they tried to track down Elmer. According to the Herald Sun, Elmer and Therese had prepared new wills around 2 weeks before the killings. If Therese died before Elmer did, he would inherit all of their assets, including several $1,000s in cash, the family home, and some real estate in Queensland. Police also uncovered evidence of Elmer stealing items from his workplace and then selling them before his family's murder. But police couldn't find Elmer, and that really caused the investigation to stall. First of all, Gibbs, they couldn't even confirm if he was alive or dead, and if he was alive, whether he committed these horrific murders.
Yeah. There's a lot of strange things going on there, right? A couple of weeks before, he's hauling a lot of stuff to the trash.
He's stealing stuff from his workplace. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that really don't make him look good, I would think, in the eyes of police. Obviously, they want to talk to him, but they just can't find him. So really, where can the investigation go if you can't find your prime suspect to talk to interrogate? Where do you go?
Yeah, it's very difficult for the investigators.
In 1971, the Victorian Coroner's Court heard the sickening details of what occurred on the night of the murders. They had reports that Elmer messed with the electrical meter box and fuses, most likely to ensure that they wouldn't blow when he electrocuted his family.
Take some planning there.
According to The Age, Elmer most likely pushed the car off the cliff in the hopes that it would appear as though Therese had killed her children and taken her own life. Police theorized that this was part of Elmer's plan, to make it appear as though Therese had left him, then bludgeon the children to death before driving their bodies and killing herself over the edge of the gorge. Now, if it was him, his plan didn't work out the way that he had hoped.
Right.
He most likely didn't know that the car had gotten stuck on the rock ledge instead of plunging into the ocean.
I mean, it's pitch black, dark out, 200 feet down. He probably thought he achieved what he went there for and then drove away in the scooter.
Yeah, most likely didn't want to hang around either, right? You don't want to be seen there by anyone, so you get the heck out of Dodge. The coroner's court officially found Elmer Crawford responsible for murdering his family. Now, I do think Gibbs' case is a little different for us on Unsolved as compared to others we've covered, in the sense that, police really only ever had one suspect on their radar. And a lot of times, if that does happen, it's viewed as a bad thing, right? We call it tunnel vision. We say they only looked at one person to the exclusion of all others. I don't think that was the case here, right? The facts of the case, the circumstances, and the fact that police couldn't find Elmer, despite their best efforts, made it more likely than not that he was the killer. We know that no one has seen or heard from Elmer since he was last spotted out in front of his home in the late afternoon, early evening, the day the bodies were discovered. Or at least no one has come forward to say that they have.
Right. Makes it hard for the police to do what they need to do. You have nobody to question. All you can do is theorize.
Yeah, but it seems like a pretty good theory.
Seems like a really good theory.
But you can't hold somebody accountable. You can't figure out the truth, for sure, if you can't interrogate your prime suspect, the person who you believe did it.
Yeah.
So let's run it back a little bit, talk a little bit about Elmer, who he was, and what could have possibly led him to execute his entire family and then go on the run. According to the Irish Independent newspaper, Elmer was born in May 1930 in Quebec, Canada. His mother was originally from Derry in Northern Ireland. Now, we don't really know what she was doing in Canada. We don't know who Elmer's father was. As a child, Elmer immigrated to Northern Ireland, where he grew up with his grandparents, but he wasn't real good in school. He didn't actually finish school. In 1951, when he was 21 years old, he decided to move to Australia.
It was the thing to do back then.
A lot of British citizens were doing that at the time. He eventually got a job doing mechanical and electrical work at the Victorian Racing Club. But he also started stealing copper wire and other things from his employer, which he later sold to pawn shops and scrap metal dealers. He and Therese married in February 1957, and Elmer was known as a devoted father. He was said to have been generous with his time and a person who was willing to help out neighbors when they needed it. But he was also a social loner. He was very quiet, kept to himself, and was also said to be pretty frugal when it came to finances.
Nothing wrong with that.
I know you don't believe so. You are, at the very least, frugal. That might be an understatement for you.
Maybe.
I like to say cheap, but we'll go with frugal.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, on the other hand, Therese was sociable, and she had no problems making friends.
I guess opposites do attract.
They do, Now, there are a number of theories on why Elmer may have brutally and callously disposed of his family. One is that he was outraged about Therese's pregnancy and that she refused to have an abortion, despite her being unhappy at the prospect of having another child. According to the book Almost Perfect, Elmer demanded Therese start taking contraceptives after Karen was born because he didn't want the upheaval of his wife experiencing another bout of postpartum depression. Another theory, according to the Herald Sun, is that Therese found out Elmer was stealing from the racing club and either made threats to report him or demanded a divorce, or maybe both. Police believe Elmer's carefully premeditated plan was to report his family missing, using Therese's mental health as an excuse, and then inherit everything. But when he realized that investigators were onto him much faster than he anticipated, he had to make a quick getaway. I think that goes back to your point, Gibbs. I don't think he ever expected police to be knocking at his door so quickly.
Yeah, because I think he probably thought the car actually went into the ocean.
And so there would be no reason for the police to be knocking on his door.
Right.
At least not then. Maybe later. One detective told The Age he wouldn't have been surprised if Elmer fled across the country in Western Australia, reinventing himself with a new persona in a small town where no one asked too many questions.
Well, it's 1970. It's probably a whole lot easier to reinvent yourself back then than it would be today.
Yeah, I mean, that's a topic that you and I have discussed. Much easier to disappear, right? To get off the grid in the 50s, 60s, 70s compared to today.
Yeah. And they're not going to have your face plastered on the news 24/7 either.
Well, because there was no 24/7 news.
Yeah.
Like there is today, which would also mean that there's not going to be the constant updates like there would be today. You could even open a bank account back then without having to provide any ID. I just think all the way around, it was much, much easier for someone to disappear, to cover their tracks if they felt they needed to.
You know, some of the theories that they laid out, I think it's difficult to believe that someone would kill their whole family in attempts to keep their wife from going through another bout of postpartum. I think that's a tough one for me to believe.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, I think that one's hard. Now, when you get into, the money angle, that's a little more believable.
Sure it is.
Greed, we know, motivates people to commit murder. Also, if she was going to divorce him or go to police about, some illegal things that he had been doing, I can see some motivation based on some of that stuff.
Yeah, for me, that's more plausible for sure.
So Gibbs, if Elmer murdered his family, one of the big questions is why, right? We've kind of talked about some of the theories. He went through quite a bit of planning, premeditation, if he carried this out.
Yeah. And why did it have to be so brutal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you're really getting into the area of, was he that angry at not only his wife, but his children?
Yeah, it kind of seemed like he was.
I mean, I still go back to the financial aspect of it. If Therese had threatened divorce, okay, there's motive there. He would have had a lot to lose financially, talking about splitting assets, but also paying child support for 4 children.
It's a hefty amount.
But if she dies, then all of their assets would have been his alone.
No outgoing payments, inherits all that real estate, money, whatever. No threat of someone telling the police that you've been stealing from your work. Maybe that's what he wanted.
Well, again, to me, that makes a heck of a lot more sense than being worried about your wife going through another bout of postpartum depression. I get it. you would be worried about that.
Right.
But your solution would be to kill her and the children?
Doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make sense. So then we have to ask the question, where did Elmer head to after the murders? Police didn't know.
No.
Nobody was coming forward with any information, despite the fact that there were widespread inquiries across Australia. The first meaningful breakthrough in the case didn't come until 1994, more than 20 years after the murders. According to news.com.au, a woman in the city of Bunbury in Western Australia was shocked when she saw a man she recognized as Elmer Crawford in a local restaurant. The woman spoke to the man she believed was Elmer.
And she said she had known him well in the past.
So you would think she would be pretty accurate in her identification.
Yeah.
But he insisted that she was mistaken. He was not Elmer Crawford. He told her that he lived in New Zealand and he was in Western Australia on vacation. After police considered all the details of the encounter, they came to believe that it was a genuine sighting.
Look, I've ran into people I haven't seen in 20, 30 years. But when you know that's got to be that person.
Oh, sure.
Mannerisms, the way you just know.
I just had my 30-year anniversary.
Yeah.
As soon as I walked into the place. Okay, there's Joe, there's Bob, there's,
right.
Now I might forget people's names.
Right.
But I know who they are.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen them. I remember them. It's not like I see somebody and go, who is that?
Yeah.
I don't remember that person at all.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't go to a really big high school, but,
but
it wasn't that hard.
I know that in the place that we worked together, that if you saw somebody back when you originally started.
Sure.
You would say, oh, what's their name?
Sure.
You just know.
But really, after the sighting, nothing else happened for years until 2008, when the Victorian government announced a $100,000 reward for any information leading to Elmer's arrest. According to the Australian ABC, police also released a colorized, age-enhanced digital image of what Elmer would look like if he were still alive today. And this seemed to have provided a bunch of motivation because tips started flooding into the Victoria police.
Oh, $100,000 is a lot of money.
We talk about it in every Australian case we do. $100,000 seems to be the number.
Yeah.
We see it time and time again, and it's shocking that it also seems to produce a lot of tips.
Yeah.
You know why? Because $100,000 is a lot of money.
People are like, 50,000,
5,000
yeah.
We see in some cases.
Yeah, those 5 and 10,000, I don't think it's going to do much for a case.
The information led to Victorian detectives traveling to Western Australia, but there's not a ton of information as to what, if anything, happened as a result of this trip. Then in July 2010, another lead emerged. By this time, Victoria Police and the FBI were working on confirming the identity of a man who died of a heart attack in San Angelo, Texas, 5 years earlier in 2005. They thought that there was a real chance this man could be Elmer Crawford. Investigators had been tipped off by someone who had contacted Crime Stoppers to say that the digital aged progressed photo of Elmer was very similar to that of a man whose photo was on a website dedicated to missing persons in the U.S. According to the Sydney Morning Herald, the dead mystery man was said to have been known by several aliases during his life, including Harold Freisinger, Gerald Brown, Roger Smith, and Peter Turner. It definitely seemed as though Harold had lived a life on the run from someone or something. Many years before his death, he'd altered his fingerprints and had multiple documents in different identities. Whew, this guy sounds a lot like you. Little Jason Bourne-like.
I did do that thing to my fingertips.
You did. I told you not to, but you did. Now you have to live with it.
Yeah, and it didn't really accomplish what I wanted.
The Sydney Morning Herald reported that law enforcement also used facial recognition technology to help determine if the man known as Harold was really Elmer Crawford. It got to the point where there was talk of exhuming the bodies of one of the Crawford children in an attempt to confirm whether Harold was the man police were after. But only about a month after this development, hopes were dashed when, according to the Australian ABC, DNA obtained from one of Elmer's living relatives failed to match that of Harold. So it was an interesting tip, an interesting lead, didn't pan out.
Still an interesting story.
Sure. Well, and it just shows you that, okay, 2010, 40 years on, they were kind of hot and heavy in pursuit of Elmer Crawford.
They have not given up.
No. If Elmer were still alive today, he'd be 91 years old, which is entirely possible. There's nothing to suggest he has died, but obviously Gibbs, the more that time passes, the more likely it is that he will die.
Sure.
I mean, that's just a fact of life.
Exactly.
There's no getting around that. But even so, police remain confident about solving the case, even if Elmer is dead. Now, I don't know how they can be so confident in solving the case if Elmer's dead, because they haven't been able to do so.
Right.
You know, we kind of said back then, to me, the key to solving the case was finding him, talking to him, you know, poking holes in his story. Maybe he breaks down and confesses. Without that, I mean, we're 50 years plus on.
Sure.
I don't know what is going to help them solve the case just by finding out that, okay, he's dead. We know where he went to. That part I don't understand.
Yeah. I mean, you have the coroner's inquest, but you would like to have that opportunity to sit across from him and say,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, as far as unsolved episodes go, and we say this from time to time, this is about as close to a solved case as you can get.
Sure is.
I mean, a coroner's inquest determined that he was the murderer.
Right.
But he's never been convicted.
Yeah.
So technically it is an unsolved case. If you have information on the whereabouts of Elmer Crawford, you can contact Crime Stoppers Victoria in Australia or Crime Stoppers International at 31088-554-3240 or submit a confidential report on the Crime Stoppers Victoria website. So Gibbs, as we wrap this one up, it's a fascinating case. Now, it's heartbreaking. You're talking about a wife, a mother. We talked about the 3 children, and then later on, we disclosed the fact that she was pregnant.
Right.
So really, we're talking about 4 children.
Yeah.
It's just a heartbreaking case all around. But it is one of those where it's hard to believe anything other than Elmer Crawford was responsible. And the reason behind it had something to do with greed, not wanting to pay money, not wanting to have your secrets divulged, you know, something along those lines.
Because at the end of the day, if he did do this, he ran off anyway. It has been in hiding all this time.
Mm-hmm.
If you can make that work, couldn't you just not killed your family and found a way to survive?
Sure. That's a great point.
I mean, it's just like, are you? I wish these people would think, but that's not ever going to happen.
But I go back to the point of, I don't think he thought he was going to have to run, because I believe he thought his plan was going to work and that the police would believe that Therese killed the kids, took her own life, and or they were just missing.
Right.
And so they'd never be able to pin anything on him. Now, when they show up at the house and there's blood everywhere, then it's kind of hard to get out of that.
Yeah, I mean, if he would have made sure the car actually went into the ocean,
maybe he does get away with it.
Maybe he has more time to clean the house up, get rid of all that evidence, and then gets to act as the sad husband and father of the family.
Yeah, that's a scary thought, really, when you think about it, that maybe a matter of inches, a foot.
Yeah.
I don't know what the distance was that the car would have needed to travel to clear that ledge. And if it does he get away with it? That is a scary thought. But that's it for our case on the Crawford family murders. We got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Meredith, A-stroke, and from Ohio. I just finished listening to the Villisca axe murders. And one thing, I just had to move in with my mom, and my commute went from half an hour to an hour. So you guys are really helping me through that. But one thing that stood out to me in the podcast is you were saying how the murderer covered up not only the windows, but the mirrors. And you're saying, like, oh, he didn't want to see himself and maybe felt guilty. But the first thing I thought of was, like, I remember hearing, like, Victorian era, they would cover up the mirrors when someone died. So I Googled it real quick just to make sure I remembered right, and that is a thing. And the Victorian era ended not too long before the murders. And one of the ones I saw was that it's possible that if you are in a house where someone died and you look in the mirror and you see the image of a dead person, you're going to be next. Which, if you've killed a whole family, you might see one of those faces. So he wouldn't want to risk his chances. Or there's also some that it'll trap the spirit in the house or something like that. So that's the first thing I thought of. Maybe that's like a leftover superstition that he still followed. Anyways, I love the podcast. Love you both. And keep your own time ticking. Bye.
All right. Love you too. And I've actually had a lot of people write in about that.
We did.
Something we didn't talk about. Most of what I have seen is, okay, it was done so that the person's soul wasn't trapped in the house. And, you know, I kind of go back to, unless it was a family member or the reverend, why does the person care?
Yeah.
You just killed a family. Why would you care if their soul is then trapped into the house? Now, she's saying something I hadn't heard before, which is you would be the next to die. Now, somebody would care about that.
They would.
Whether they were a killer or not.
Woo! All right. Hey, guys, this is David from Kentucky again. I was calling to ask a couple of questions. If you all did the Nicole Simpson case, would that be unsolved or unsolved? Also, I had a suggestion. See if maybe you all was going to do the Crystal Rogers case in Bardstown, Kentucky. I know it's been picked up quite a bit, but I'd like to get one solid episode of you all going through it so I have a good grasp of things. Hashtag Team Gibby. Later. Keep your own time ticking.
Yeah, so definitely Crystal Rogers is on the list.
Certainly is.
As far as Nicole Brown Simpson, I think we'd have to do it on unsolved, just because technically it's unsolved.
Right.
But I don't know that it would be, I don't want to say it's kind of like this one, but it is kind of unresolved. Now, I do think there are many people that believe he did it.
Sure.
I'm sure there are still a lot of people who don't believe he did it. I think there are less people now than there were when the verdict first came out.
Right.
Because of things that have happened throughout the years. Sure. But technically he wasn't convicted of it. So it's unsolved. But it would be a fascinating case. I do feel like it'd take a ton of episodes.
It would.
There was so much to that case.
So much information.
Yeah.
You will front desk as soon as possible. There will be a customer service staff to serve you.
你好 ，DHL， 你有关于海外包裹未领取问题，这是最后一次通知，请尽速联系人工前台，查询包裹请按9，按9有客服人员为你服务。
Okay, so I found this on the voicemail.
Yeah.
I thought I would play it.
Interesting.
I have no idea what is being said, but I think I heard DHL in there somewhere.
Yeah, I think what you heard, it's been a while since I spoke that language, but I think they're saying...
But you can't tell us what it is.
DHL has a package for us from a very loyal listener that loves the podcast.
Okay.
And it should be arriving soon once it gets past all the customs and things like that. Yeah.
Okay. I knew if I played it for you, you'd get close.
Yeah.
To what they were saying, and hopefully it was nothing bad in there, and there's like a listener that actually understands what that was, and saying, I can't believe you just played that.
Yeah, well, what are you guys thinking? Would the tone of the voice sounded nice? And
it was very pleasant. It wasn't like, mean or anything, but it's interesting what gets left on voicemails.
Sure. Yeah.
So. All right, buddy. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.